Let me ask you a question. What do you think makes a project or a stream of work successful? Generally speaking, we might say it's an initiative that has defined goals, goes to time, to budget and to plan, and of course, delivers results. In this day and age, we really rely on our tools to help us do that, to see the deliverables, the dependencies, and of course, how the planned work will help us to achieve progress. But we simply can't do any of that without the team in place to see it through. To do that, we need to set that team up for success. And today, I'm going to talk about how cross-functional agile teams are key to enabling that success. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm Jasmine Jordanidis and I'm Product Marketing Manager at Easy Agile. You might be wondering why I'm so compelled to share this with you today and what I would even know about cross-functional teams. So to share, in my career, the past couple of years, I've had the experience of not being in one, as well as being a non-technical person in both short-lived and long-lived cross-functional teams. So I've picked up some learnings along the way that I thought would be valuable to share with you. So today I'm actually going to walk you through a real-life example of a cross-functional team that I've worked with at Easy Agile. And specifically, I really want to talk about the benefits that we both felt and saw by being in a cross-functional team. Also, how we did it and what was key to that success. And I'd like to share a key watch out. Something that I've learned is inevitable on the path to cross-functional, but that we shouldn't be dismayed about either. So up until starting at Easy Agile mid-2020, I actually worked in a nearly 100-person strong marketing team for a university. And I worked in the department that was responsible for student recruitment marketing. So as you can imagine, to deliver big initiatives, we needed to work with a lot of people across the team and across the university. So in this area of marketing, there are a lot of stakeholders. Each provides feedback and input and information. So directors of departments, faculties, designers, developers, students, and of course the student recruitment team. So to get a prospectus started, the kind that you get at the careers fairs, we literally would start the process around 8 months prior. And with each draft, as you would expect, more feedback would come through. Sometimes that feedback would negate or even completely change feedback from earlier stages. We did our best. We had deadlines and sub-deadlines to help mitigate that risk, but somehow still things ended up at the stage where we needed to get on the phone to the printer a couple of hours before going to print. This might sound familiar to you and something that you've had happen at your organization. I'm sure there are many of you out there who could relate to something like this. But as you can tell, what I'm describing is a waterfall way of working. And while we know this is prone to inefficiencies and being stressful, I want to contrast this to how we actually changed how we worked in the lead up to a critical milestone. So for student recruitment, crunch time really is when high school results go out and universities give out their offers. So that's how it works in Australia. Students will do their final exams. They will apply as part of one application to multiple universities. And when those results get released, the universities go out with those offers. So in that period of time between the results being released and the offers needing to be finalized by the student, ourselves in the marketing team and student recruitment would commandeer a large meeting room. So in the same building, pre-COVID. And the reason for doing that really was because at this crucial and critical time, we needed to be responsive to opportunities as well as changes that would come through. So at this time, the key thing to remember is that we were all concerned with the same thing. And that was encouraging students to accept their offers to study with us. And by being in the same room, being together and working together, we were able to respond quickly to that. So for that period of time, when it mattered most and the cost of delay was high, instead of being organised around functional silos of recruitment and marketing and other departments, we reorganised around value and we contributed our specialised skills to deliver a better experience to prospective students, but also faster. So fast forward to my experience at Easy Agile. So for the past 9 or so months, I've been in a long-lived cross-functional team, and that's centered around 2 of our products. So in this cross-functional team specifically includes our product manager, Elizabeth, product designer, Adrian, Jared, our technical lead, and our awesome team of developers, Brad, Ungad, John, and Connor. But I actually today want to share my experience of being in a short-lived cross-functional team. So it was formed during Easy Agile's version of Hackathon, which we call Inception Week. The reason I want to share this with you is because from start to finish, in just 1 week, we delivered an MVP for a completely new feature that is now being built into one of our apps in 1 week. So there are a myriad of ways you can organize a cross-functional team, be it around value streams, products, stages of the customer journey, or business themes. But the idea really here is that in this team, you've effectively got all the skills and touch points that you need to deliver end-to-end value to your customer. And remember that sometimes a version of a customer can also just be an internal stakeholder. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about customer here. So for our Inception Week, our theme as a company was something smart. That was the theme that the project had to be. And we needed a minimum of 3 people. So there were a whole different range of projects going on, as there often is. And to be perfectly honest, it actually started out quite dismally. It was Monday morning, start of the Inception Week sprint, and Jared, Jerome, Brad, and I were sat around ready to start work on a completely different project to the one I just mentioned. So the wind was completely taken out of our sails when we realized that our idea of success and our goal for the week didn't necessarily align with what we needed to cover off from the business's perspective. It needed more than 1 week, and we had to work through a whole bunch of other dependencies. So feeling dismayed and at the point of disbanding and even going to join other projects, Jerome, who at the time was a developer, but has actually since transitioned to being a product manager, said, "Hey, I have this idea, but I don't know if it's too crazy to work and whether we should do it." So with a little ray of hope, we all sat there and listened. In short, Jerome's idea was awesome. So one of our products at Easy Agile focuses on supporting Agile teams in sprint planning and the ceremonies that help make that successful around sprint planning. And his idea was to include a feature that would allow teams to add items to a retro board for retrospectives in the context of the work in Jira. So brilliant. Next question. Did we have all we needed on the team to deliver that value to the customer? Well, let's take a closer look. So here's the team, all of us there. And these aren't necessarily our job titles per se, but more the functions and the skill sets we had across the group. So there's myself in product marketing, Jerome, as I said, who was working in development at the time, but has transitioned to product, Brad, design development, Belen, Jared, development and technical implementation. So across that, we had everything covered, including the UX side of things. So this is one of the brilliant things that came out of the Inception Week, needing more than 3 people and having that criteria, was that it made more parts of the team come together. And at this juncture, I want to point out 2 key benefits of having a cross-functional team. As you can see from the roles represented here, we've got multiple disciplines. So from marketing to product to development and design. So what this actually meant was that from the get-go, we had multiple perspectives rallying around a common opportunity. And by doing this, cross-functional teams more broadly get value because we can then learn from each other and we can contribute different ways of thinking to solve problems, which we did. So when Jerome said that, my response was like, that's so cool. It would mean our customers wouldn't need another tool to separate their sprints to actually close out the sprint with the retro. And Jared was like, we could actually build it so it could link directly to a Jira ticket. And Brad contributed UX and design ideas so that it could feel easy and intuitive. And Belen, who joined our team later that morning, gave real examples from her own team of where a feature like that could and would help if it was built. And in less than 30 minutes on that fateful Monday morning, we went from a point of abandoning the team to knowing we were onto a good thing and we could make it work. So sure, as the name suggests, this was Inception Week, but this really does highlight a real asset of the cross-functional team and those multiple perspectives, and that's innovation. If we were going about our BAU, working through our sprints, our priorities, our backlog, the configuration of this particular group of people around this particular idea may never have happened. So the fruit of that collaboration, though, is that we did. So in the space of the week, we gathered customer research and testimonials. So given at Easy Agile, our teams use Jira and our products and also do retros. So we started with them. They were our customer that week. We took a look at product alternatives to see how a feature like this would stack up in the market. We worked out if it was technically possible and the requirements to make that work, as well as our definition of done. We looked at how this would work with our UI and what the best user experience was. So to create a retro item and of the actual retro board itself. What was really important though, given it was a week, was that we had a clear idea of what success looked like, in that we wanted it to be at the point at the end of the week where we could present a shippable feature to the business. And as part of that work, we shaped the value proposition to actually present that to the business. And of course, like any sprint, last but not least, we put together the presentation deck to demo at the end of Inception Week with the rest of the teams across Easy Agile. It was a hit. The team and our leadership loved it. There were a couple of questions, but lo and behold, our Inception Week project of Easy Agile Retros, as it was, is now making its way into our product to deliver this value to the customer. And when you look at this, and you look at this slide and think that we covered all of these deliverables for an MVP in just 1 week, it's pretty astonishing. But as a cross-functional team, we were able to self-organize and accomplish all of these tasks because we represented multiple perspectives and skill sets, but also we had the decision-making capability of how to go about it as well. So in and of itself, this is a byproduct of the cross-functional team. It moves faster and is more efficient, which really, when you think about project management, is the holy grail we often seek: efficiency and speed. As a segue, if you look at this slide, which, by the way, is just placeholder of the task that we did, it's a rough visualization of how we went about the week. Even so, can you imagine what this would have looked like if it weren't for cross-functional? If we took this on in more of a waterfall way where tasks would have been more sequential and perhaps we might have had a meeting there or here. But as you can see, we would have been at risk of rework. If learnings from one function weren't shared with another in a timely way, it could have provided a fork in the road. It could have completely thrown off another stream of work or become a blocker for somebody else. So I think that speaks for itself, really. The thing to really remember here is that, as we've all probably experienced, silos slow things down. Silos stifle communication and they delay the delivery of value. So by coming together in a cross-functional team, really that's the end game. And you might be curious at this stage about the mechanics of the team and how we actually worked during that week. And sure, it was 1 week in the spirit of Inception. It was separate to the rest of the business priorities that we usually take care of. But what I'm about to share and some of those mechanics and those key ingredients also comes from me having worked in a long-lived cross-functional team. So as part of an apps team for 9 or so months. So the thing to remember and the thing that was key was that we were all aligned. We all knew what success looked like for the end of that week. If I'd chimed in and said, this would be great for all of our other products as well, or I'd sought to investigate that, the scope would have been completely blown out. We also knew what our respective roles and responsibilities were. So they did fall out more easily owing to our skill sets as well, but we had a clear way that we were each adding value to that particular project. I'll also say that this alignment and clarity really relied on another necessity of a cross-functional agile team. And really, that's trust. Trust is foundational to a cross-functional team because by virtue of you representing a cross-section of skills and knowledge, you necessarily need to rely on others to help you achieve your common goal. You also have to rely on them for help, and you can't do that without trust. So we had rigorous discussions around certain topics to contribute our views, but at this end of the day, we trusted the expertise that we each had and what we recommended as the next best step. So we shared what we thought, we shared our opinions, we had honest discussions, but we got on with it. And so that too helped things to move along. And that also brings us to something else that's really important, and that's transparency. If at the start of the week with our original project idea, we weren't completely honest, it wouldn't have created the right environment for the team to thrive. I distinctly remember we were all mulling our options over with our original Inception Week idea, and Jared sat back and said, "I'm not excited by this." And that was it. We knew we had to change course, not just because of that, but we all want to be on board with what we're doing. So transparency and trust really are mutual dependencies in this way, because you need to be able to trust that you can be transparent with the team. So this is true, especially if something isn't going to plan, because if you can't be transparent in those situations, time can be wasted, or there can be smoke and mirrors, and really that just leads to getting nowhere fast. Transparency is also really important because it's by virtue of being able to provide feedback from multiple parts of the team that can actually help to improve iteratively and faster. So you can make decisions faster because you're equipped to see the end-to-end value of what you're delivering. And of course, to support any of this, you need good communication. So that's actually Jerome, from left, Belen, Jerome and Jared, on one of the days that we were in the office looking over one of our prototypes and giving it a good test. So in much the same way as a long-lived cross-functional team, I think any team, cross-functional or any team, really, you need communication. So during that Inception Week particularly, we met, as we did with our teams usually, every morning for a stand-up, so to see where things were at, but also being such a condensed period of time, we were really hands-on during the day, communicating our progress and asking questions throughout the day. So we use Slack for that. But as a sidebar, even in our long-lived cross-functional team, we've got agile ceremonies. I'm a non-technical person, so I've actually struck a balance in how to contribute to those ceremonies in a way that adds and shares value. So for example, when the team starts to break down tickets during sprint planning, the development team, I don't necessarily stay for that. And I'll come to stand up every alternate day, but I do represent my top line work items on Jira for visibility. So you appropriate some things to make it work for the unique mix of people that you've got in the team and what will work for their respective types of work. And as a sidebar as well, if there's any non-technical people out there, particularly who have experience or want to chat about what it's like to be a non-technical person in a cross-functional team, or indeed the reverse, I'd really love to hear from you. Last but not least, another ingredient in the recipe for success here is that you get to share the wins. So you share the responsibility, the accountability, and the deliverables, but you also get to share the wins. So, this is a snapshot of our Inception Week prototype, which will probably look completely different by the time it gets into the product, because we wouldn't be improving iteratively otherwise. But it is a bit of a boon to think that something we worked on in an Inception Week is now actually being shipped to our customers. So what's more important is that, the team that we formed in Inception Week and the collaboration that we built has actually extended beyond that week. So if it wasn't for Inception Week, I didn't have the opportunity to work with Jerome or Belen at any point prior. And so that's really one of the biggest benefits, is that you get to have people who may not otherwise cross paths come together and work on something together and bear the fruits of that, which is really awesome. And so they build relationships that last beyond the length of the project. And one of the biggest compliments and testament to that is I actually received from Jerome. So since working at Easy Agile, Jerome, as I said, is now in product management. And after our Inception Week, he said, I have to be honest, I didn't really know up until that point what you did in your role as a product marketing manager, but having you part of that team was so valuable. And Jerome learned in my role, and as we've worked on things since, that I'd want to know about the customer perspective and pain points and how anything in the product would help us to stack up in the market. You saw how I was able to shape that into messaging and craft the value proposition. And ultimately, at the end of the week, that helped us to communicate that back to the business. But during that week, I also learned so much. I learned about the need for anything in the product, and when we created the retro items, for that to be intuitive to the user, and the decisions that need to be made behind that to make that happen. I learned for the retro categories to be clear, to be able to see who created them for clarity during the retro ceremony itself, and how to make it obvious through product design which actions needed to be taken. So I learned a stack in that week from that perspective. So while this is a success story, and I do hope I've inspired you on the benefits of cross-functional teams, I do want to provide a word of caution in the name of transparency on forming cross-functional teams, especially long-lived ones. And that is, it isn't necessarily going to be a smooth process. So once all the people in your cross-functional team are on board, it's time to get on the bus. And what I mean by that is being open to the changes in workflows, in processes, in communication, in who's involved in all of that, because you have to be prepared when starting a cross-functional team and getting on the bus that it's going to be a little bumpy. You're leaving a destination, a way of doing things, a way of being organized behind. So it's going to be different. And so for those who are familiar with Bruce Tuckman's forming, storming, norming, and performing model, I have to say those first two stages of forming and storming can be challenging and frustrating. It feels so much easier to revert back to how you may have worked before, because at that point in those stages, familiar feels faster, so it can feel more attractive to revert back. To overcome this though, what I will say is a growth mindset is such an important attribute to have in a cross-functional team, and to remind yourself of as well during those challenges, because it is what will inevitably give you the endurance and the resilience you need. You will go through challenges. Things may take longer at first. You have to reorientate yourself. You might get feedback you weren't expecting, but it's part of the process. In our apps team, I would say it took us a good quarter to smooth out the bumps and the friction points. And so in light of that as well, I would say it's really important when forming a cross-functional team not to be overly ambitious in what you're committing yourselves to. You have to be aware that things will take a little longer. And that's where we come back to transparency and communication. So factoring that into your initial plans when you've just formed a cross-functional team. What I will say though, is that the net benefit of persevering and pushing through those initial forming and storming stages promises great things. It builds connections with others in the team, mutual rapport and trust, confidence, productivity, engagement, and job satisfaction. And for us, it's also resulted in teams at Easy Agile taking on our work afterwards and delivering something that is hopefully of value to our customers, which is the biggest reason we come to work each day. So I hope you've been able to gain something useful from my sharing our experience of this at Easy Agile. I'd absolutely love to learn of your experiences in forming cross-functional teams, with the view that I could learn something from what has and hasn't worked from you. So please do reach out, and I'd love to chat some more. Thanks for joining me. Enjoy the rest of PM72. There are some awesome speakers, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thanks.